The office was adorned with twinkling fairy lights that cast a warm glow over the conference room, now transformed into a festive wonderland. Red and green streamers hung from the ceiling, and a small artificial Christmas tree stood proudly in the corner, decorated with miniature office supplies, tiny staplers, and paper clip ornaments that HR thought would be quirky and fun. The annual holiday party at Meridian Marketing was in full swing, with the usual mix of enthusiasm and awkwardness that comes when professional colleagues attempt to socialize outside their normal parameters. I stood by the punch bowl, nursing my second cup of the suspiciously strong concoction that Dave from accounting had enhanced when he thought no one was looking. My name is Alex Chin, and I've been with Meridian for just over 2 years now. I'm part of the creative team, where I spend my days designing campaigns that I'm passionate about but that clients often water down to something barely recognizable. I like my job well enough. The pay is decent, my coworkers are generally pleasant, and the work challenges me just enough without consuming my life. But there's been another reason I've looked forward to coming to work each day for the past 8 months, and he was currently laughing across the room with a small group from the sales department. Ben Winters joined our team last spring as a copywriter, and from the moment he walked into our first brainstorming session with his slightly rumpled button-down shirt and infectious enthusiasm, I was captivated. He has this way of speaking that makes even the most mundane topics sound fascinating, his hands animating his words, his eyes lighting up when he's excited about an idea. And that smile, it transforms his whole face, creating little crinkles around his eyes that I find myself thinking about at the most inappropriate times, like during client calls or department meetings. Of course, I've kept my feelings carefully hidden behind a wall of professional courtesy. Office romances are complicated enough without adding the layer of uncertainty about whether he'd even be interested in me. I've picked up on little things, the rainbow pin on his messenger bag, the casual mention of an ex-boyfriend during lunch once. But in our industry, being an ally is as common as having a Twitter account, so I've never been entirely sure. The holiday party was in full swing now. The playlist had shifted from the safe, corporate-approved holiday classics to more contemporary hits as people loosened up. The catering spread was impressive. Management had splurged this year after landing the Peterson account, and platters of elegant hors d'oeuvres were being circulated by waitstaff in festive attire. I watched as my coworkers transformed from the people I see hunched over keyboards every day to these slightly louder, more animated versions of themselves. Melissa from HR was demonstrating what she claimed were professional salsa moves to a bemused group from IT. The new interns huddled together near the dessert table, still unsure of their place in the company hierarchy even with holiday spirits flowing freely. Our CEO, normally intimidating in her tailored suits and direct manner, was wearing a headband with bobbing reindeer antlers and laughing genuinely at something our office manager had said. I was contemplating whether I could slip out unnoticed. I'd made my obligatory appearances, complimented the appropriate people on their festive attire, and participated in enough small talk to fulfill my social obligations. When Ben appeared at my side, 2 fresh cups of punch in hand. "You look like you could use a refill," he said, offering me one of the cups with that smile that always made my stomach flip. "Unless you're driving? Then I can get you something non-alcoholic instead." "No, I'm good. I took the subway here," I replied, accepting the punch gratefully. "Thanks for the rescue. I was just watching Melissa teach the IT guys how to dance. It's something." Ben laughed, the sound warm and rich. "I think what she's doing could technically be classified as dancing in at least 3 or 4 states. The others, I'm not so sure." He leaned against the wall beside me, our shoulders almost touching. "So, are you enjoying the party?" There was something about Ben that always put me at ease, even as my heart raced at his proximity. He had this genuine interest when he spoke to people, as if your answer to even the most mundane question was the most fascinating thing he'd heard all day. It made conversations with him feel intimate, even when we were discussing work projects or debating the merits of different coffee shops near the office. "It's better than last year," I admitted. "Remember how the fire alarm went off during the CEO's speech, and we all had to stand in the snow for 45 minutes? How could I forget? That was my introduction to Meridian's famous holiday traditions. Nothing says, 'Welcome to the team,' like huddling for warmth with people you barely know while your new boss tries to finish her speech through chattering teeth." As we reminisced about past office disasters, I noticed the party beginning to thin out around us. It was approaching 11, and people with families or long commutes were making their exits. Small groups coalesced and dispersed, farewell hugs were exchanged, and promises to do lunch after the holidays filled the air. The music had been turned down to accommodate the goodbyes, and the energy of the room was shifting from celebration to the inevitable winding down. I felt a familiar bittersweetness wash over me. Holiday parties always left me feeling this way, a strange mixture of warmth from the communal celebration and a subtle loneliness that seemed to intensify as people paired off or returned to their families. I was contemplating my own exit when Ben spoke again. "Planning to head out soon?" he asked, something unreadable in his expression. "I was thinking about it," I admitted. "The crowd's thinning out, and I've got some errands to run tomorrow morning." Ben nodded, then seemed to hesitate before speaking again. "Or, we could stay a bit longer? I mean, we're not exactly responsible for cleanup, but it feels wrong to leave Janet and the interns to deal with everything." He gestured toward our office manager, who was already beginning to gather discarded plates with the reluctant help of 2 interns. There was something in his tone that made me pause, a hint of something beyond simple courtesy to our colleagues. "Sure," I heard myself say before I'd fully processed the decision. "We can help out for a while." The next half hour passed in a blur of collecting empty cups, consolidating leftover food onto fewer platters, and folding up the extra chairs that had been brought in for the event. The party continued its natural dissolution until, suddenly, I realized that almost everyone had left. Janet was zipping up her coat by the door, keys in hand. "You two are lifesavers," she called over to us. "I've got to run if I'm going to catch my train. Can you just make sure the lights get turned off when you leave? The cleaning crew will handle the rest tomorrow." "No problem," Ben assured her. "We'll lock up." "Have a good night, Janet." And then, somehow, impossibly, it was just the 2 of us in the large conference room, surrounded by the remnants of holiday cheer. The silence felt enormous after hours of music and conversation. I busied myself with straightening a stack of napkins, suddenly unsure of what to say or do in this unexpected private moment. "Well," I began awkwardly, "I guess we should. Do you want another drink?" Ben interrupted, already moving toward the remaining bottles of wine on the refreshment table. "Seems a shame to let this go to waste, and we've done our good deed for the night." There was something different about him now, a slight nervousness that I hadn't noticed before, an energy that seemed almost electric. It made me curious enough to stay, despite the rational part of my brain suggesting it was time to leave. "Sure," I said, abandoning the napkins. "One more couldn't hurt." Ben poured us each a glass of red wine, much better quality than what had been served earlier in the evening, clearly part of the private stash that management had kept aside. He handed me a glass, and our fingers brushed briefly, sending a ridiculous tingle up my arm that I tried desperately to ignore. "Cheers," he said, raising his glass. "To surviving another year at Meridian." "To survival," I agreed, clinking my glass against his. The wine was rich and smooth, warming me from the inside as I took a sip. We settled into 2 chairs near the window, where the city lights spread out below us in a tapestry of color against the December darkness. The conversation flowed easily between us, as it always did. We talked about the projects we'd worked on together, the clients who had driven us crazy, the small victories we'd celebrated throughout the year. But there was an undercurrent to our conversation now, something that hadn't been there before, or perhaps had always been there, but neither of us had acknowledged. As we talked, I noticed Ben glancing occasionally at the sound system that had been playing music all evening. Mid-sentence, he suddenly stood up. "Hold that thought," he said, crossing the room to where the laptop controlling the playlist sat connected to speakers. "What are you doing?" I asked, watching as he scrolled through options on the screen. "Finding the right song," he replied, a hint of determination in his voice. After a moment, he seemed to find what he was looking for. He adjusted the volume, turning it up just enough to fill the room without overwhelming our conversation. The opening notes of a slow song began to play, not a Christmas song, but something soulful and rich with emotion. I recognized it immediately. At Last, by Etta James, a classic that always made my heart ache a little with its raw longing and fulfillment. Ben turned to face me, and in that moment, something shifted between us. The pretense of 2 colleagues helping with cleanup, of 2 friends sharing a drink after a party, fell away. He extended his hand toward me, a question in his eyes that made my heart hammer against my ribs. "Dance with me?" he asked simply. Time seemed to suspend itself as I looked at his outstretched hand. This was a threshold, I realized, a moment that would change things between us, regardless of what happened next. My mouth went dry, and I took a sip of wine to steady myself before setting down my glass. "I should warn you," I said, standing and taking his hand. "I'm not very good at this." His fingers closed around mine, warm and sure. "That makes 2 of us," he admitted with a small laugh, but I think we can figure it out together. He led me to a clear space in the center of the room, where the overhead lights had been dimmed hours earlier for the party atmosphere. The city lights through the windows cast us in a gentle glow as he turned to face me, placing one hand lightly on my waist while keeping hold of my hand with the other. I hesitantly rested my free hand on his shoulder, acutely aware of the solid warmth beneath his shirt. We began to move slowly, awkwardly at first, trying to find a rhythm together. I was hyperconscious of every point where our bodies connected, his hand on my waist, my hand on his shoulder, our palms pressed together. I stared fixedly at a point somewhere around his collar, afraid to meet his eyes. "Alex," he said softly, and something in his voice made me look up. The vulnerability I saw in his expression took my breath away. "I've been wanting to do this for a long time." My heart stuttered. "Dance with me?" I asked, needing clarification even as hope began to unfurl in my chest. "That," he acknowledged with a small smile, "and other things. Be alone with you. Talk without deadlines or colleagues interrupting. See if what I've been feeling is just in my head or if maybe." He trailed off, uncertainty flickering across his features. We had stopped moving, I realized. We were standing still in the middle of the room, the music flowing around us, holding each other but frozen in this moment of revelation. "It's not just in your head," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I felt it too. Since you started, actually." His eyes widened slightly. 8 months? And you never said anything?" I laughed softly, the tension breaking a little. "Well, neither did you." "Fair point," he conceded, his thumb moving in a small, unconscious circle against my waist that sent shivers up my spine. "I guess I was worried about making things awkward at work. Or misreading signals. Or 100 other things that seemed important but suddenly don't anymore." We began to move again, more in sync now, our bodies finding a natural rhythm together as Etta James sang about skies of blue and the thrill of a dream coming true. The space between us had diminished, our bodies drawing closer as if pulled by some invisible force. "Can I tell you something?" Ben asked, his voice low and intimate in a way that made my pulse quicken. "Anything," I replied, meaning it completely. "That first brainstorming session we had together, the Peterson campaign? When you pitched that concept about interconnected stories across different media platforms, and your whole face lit up with excitement. That's when I knew I was in trouble." His expression was open, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. "You were so passionate and brilliant, and all I could think was that I wanted to be the reason you looked that animated outside of work." The confession hung between us, honest and raw. I felt a surge of courage, born from his willingness to be vulnerable first. For me, it was the Miller presentation, I admitted. When the client kept shooting down every idea, and everyone was getting frustrated. You were so patient and kept finding new approaches without getting defensive. And then in the break room after, you made that terrible joke about typefaces to cheer me up. I smiled at the memory. It was the worst pun I'd ever heard, but you looked so pleased with yourself that I couldn't help laughing. That's when I realized I was looking for excuses to be around you. Ben's smile was radiant. "That was a truly excellent font joke, and I stand by it." "It really wasn't," I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. We were barely dancing anymore, just swaying gently together as the song continued. Ben's hand had moved from my waist to the small of my back, drawing me closer until our chests were nearly touching. I could feel the warmth of his body, smell the faint scent of his cologne mingled with the wine on his breath. "Alex," he said, my name sounding different somehow when he said it like that, soft and full of meaning. "I'd really like to kiss you right now. If that's something you'd want to." The world seemed to narrow to just this moment, just this question hanging between us. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and then his hand was gently cupping my cheek, tilting my face up to his. He hesitated for just a moment, his eyes searching mine for any sign of doubt, and then he closed the distance between us. His lips were soft and warm against mine, the kiss gentle at first, almost questioning. I responded, my hand sliding from his shoulder to the nape of his neck, fingers threading through his hair as the kiss deepened. Everything else fell away, the office, our colleagues, the professional boundaries we'd maintained for months, leaving only this connection, this moment that felt both surprising and somehow inevitable. When we finally pulled apart, I kept my eyes closed for a moment, savoring the sensation. When I opened them, Ben was watching me with a mixture of wonder and happiness that made my heart swell. "That was," he began, then shook his head slightly. "I don't even have the words, and I'm supposed to be a writer." I laughed, feeling giddy and lightheaded in a way that had nothing to do with the wine. "I know what you mean. I think we've rendered the copywriter speechless. That should go on my performance review." He laughed too, pulling me closer into something that was more of an embrace than a dance position now. We swayed together as the song came to its conclusion, neither of us willing to let go just yet. "So what happens now?" I asked, voicing the question that hovered between us. "Tomorrow at work, I mean." Ben considered this, his expression turning thoughtful. "Well, I think we have some options. We could pretend this never happened and go back to stealing glances across the conference room." "Not my favorite option," I interjected, making him smile. "Mine neither," he agreed. "Or we could see where this goes. Take it slow, be discreet at work until we figure things out. I'm not suggesting we make out by the coffee machine or anything, though that would certainly liven up Monday morning meetings," I quipped, earning another of those laughs that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "It would definitely make Janet's weekly status updates more interesting," he agreed. Then his expression grew more serious. "But I want you to know, this isn't just a holiday party thing for me, Alex. I felt this way for months. I want to take you on proper dates, get to know you outside of work deadlines and client demands. If that's something you'd want to." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within me. "I'd like that," I said simply. "Very much." As the music shifted to another song, we remained in our embrace, talking softly about possibilities. We made tentative plans for dinner that weekend, exchanged phone numbers despite having each other's work contacts already. Somehow this felt different, more personal. The professional boundaries we'd maintained were being carefully, intentionally redrawn into something new. Eventually, we realized how late it had gotten. We reluctantly separated, gathered our belongings, and made sure everything was turned off before leaving the office. In the elevator down to the lobby, Ben reached for my hand, interlacing our fingers in a gesture that felt both new and somehow familiar. Outside, the December air was crisp and cold, the city transformed by night and the light dusting of snow that had fallen during the party. We stood on the sidewalk for a moment, reluctant to part ways. "My apartment's uptown," I said, gesturing vaguely in that direction. "I'm downtown," Ben replied, pointing the opposite way. We looked at each other and laughed at the geographical irony. Then Ben stepped closer, his breath visible in the cold air between us. "I'd offer to share a cab, but that feels a bit presumptuous for a first. Whatever this was," he said with a smile that held both humor and respect. "First dance?" I suggested. "First kiss? First confession of months-long mutual pining?" "All of the above," he agreed, reaching up to brush a snowflake from my hair, the gesture achingly tender. "But definitely not our last." He leaned in and kissed me again, briefly but with a promise that made my toes curl in my shoes. When he pulled back, his smile was dazzling even in the dim street light. "Text me when you get home safe," he asked. I nodded, already looking forward to continuing our conversation, to learning about him beyond the confines of our professional relationship. "You too." We parted ways then, heading in opposite directions, but I could feel the connection between us stretching rather than breaking. As I walked toward the subway station, I couldn't help glancing back over my shoulder. Ben was doing the same, and when our eyes met, we both laughed, caught in the same moment of not wanting to look away. The office holiday party had ended hours ago for everyone else, but for us, something entirely new had just begun. The night air felt electric with possibility as I continued on my way, already composing the text I would send him when I got home, already imagining our first real date. Already wondering how I would manage to act normally at work on Monday when everything had changed so completely. But those were concerns for tomorrow. Tonight, I would savor the memory of that slow song, of being the last ones at the office party, of the moment when Ben turned up the music and everything changed. Tonight, I would fall asleep with the lingering sensation of his lips on mine and the knowledge that what had been hidden for so long was finally in the open, ready to grow into something beautiful. Total_char_count, 18,725.